This is Buffalo State Data Talk, the podcast where we introduce you to how data is used and explore careers that involve data.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Buffalo State Data Talk. I'm your host, Heather Campbell, and thank you for joining us. Today, we're talking to George Firican, the Director of Data Governance and Business Intelligence at the University of British Columbia and founder of LightsOnData. Welcome to the show, George.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here.
So could you start us off by telling us a bit about what you do as the Director of Data Governance and Business Intelligence?
Absolutely. So let me just start by kind of breaking down what the department is all about. Overall, it really just provides that data reporting and analytics support to the engagement and the fundraising initiatives across our university. And actually, it's comprised of 4 different units or 4 different functions. So the first 2, you might have guessed there, well, one of them is data governance, the other one is business intelligence. Within data governance, we're just trying to ensure that those important data assets are formally managed throughout the university. Within the business intelligence, again, we try to provide that accessible, easily understood information through dashboards, through data polls, reports, and different audits. And of course, we kind of also lead the data integrations, data maintenance efforts. And the other 2, which are not in the department title, but they are there and they're really core functions. One of them is records, and records are mostly doing that data entry. They're maintaining and updating biographical and other constituent information within our main CRM. And then we also have the data analytics, which is overseeing all those analytics initiatives across the university when it comes to the engagement and the fundraising world. So it involves modeling and segmentation and forecasting and all the fun stuff. And my role is more on the strategy piece, but also quite a bit of hands-on on the data governance. Is data governance from, I guess the lead is kind of just the one person, but I work with business analysts and a lot of those business stakeholders to try and put together the business glossary. So that refers to the business definitions that we have on business terms and their meanings and how they tie back to the data, and then how that data should be best used and integrated and just disseminated across our users.
So what does a typical week look like for you in this position?
You know, I would have to say that maybe 80% of it is spent in meetings. A lot of meetings. I think maybe I have an hour to 2 a day where I could actually catch up on work and do some stuff. But a lot of it is meeting with stakeholders, meeting with my colleagues to try and figure out, okay, what type of projects do we have on hand? What are the roadblocks that we need to remove? What are the risks that we can identify and then reduce that risk from happening? And, convince stakeholders to get on board with certain things. So there's a lot of presentations that are happening. There's a lot of, input that needs to be provided, a lot of meetings, a lot of conversations, a lot of discussions, especially, when it comes to coming up with a new policy, when it comes to writing that definition and kind of agreeing, what's a student? And it might sound easy because how could you not know what a student is? I mean, you are a university, but there are just so many different facets. So I think those conversations can take months at times.
I think you bring up such an important point. Sometimes people, I think, kind of overlook data governance and, the idea of like, a glossary, like defining a student. You're like, that's simple. Of course, it's a student. A student is easy. No, it's not easy. It takes so much more than that.
And, companies are facing similar issues, but when it comes to customer, that's really like the big piece that always needs to be defined. And again, it sounds easy from the outside, but there are just so many different intricacies. And that's why internally you usually have different types of customers, and you finally decide on what customer overall as the organization mean.
You mentioned before that there's kind of a bunch of different areas within this research team that you work on. Could you tell me a little bit about the different roles of the team members and the background of these people? What kind of education they would need for these positions?
Absolutely. Yeah. So on the business intelligence side and on the data analytics side, they're a little bit more technical, but we have what we call the business intelligence analyst or the business intelligence programmer. And they're really tasked with making sure that when they have a data request from one of the stakeholders, that they're accessing those different databases and pulling that data in the way that it needs to be consumed. And that can be as simple as pulling in an Excel spreadsheet or building a report or building a dashboard in order to provide that information back to the stakeholders. They're also developing these tools such as reports and dashboards, and even working and customizing the CRM in order to surface all of this information and provide these lists to our stakeholders. And for that, well, again, they are highly technical. And I think the most needed skill to have is SQL. Oh, and let's not forget about the data architect, and their role is kind of to implement the BI technical architecture vision and make decisions regarding design and maintenance of the data and the technical ecosystem. So kind of think of it as how different tables of data should kind of talk to each other. How do you implement a new system, a new data mart, a new data warehouse that's maybe consuming data from different places and then outputting for different needs? And especially if there's some sort of an API integration layer between two systems that need to talk and sync data, transfer data, they're really the brain child behind this, and they're architecting the best way on doing that. So that's the BI team. Then we have the data analytics team. They're really in charge of leading those qualitative and quantitative research to support a planning, leadership, decision-making, and that comprehensive program delivery strategy for our fundraising and alumni engagement program. So they determine trends and forecast growth opportunities. They provide increased understanding and hypothesis testing of patterns and behavior for our alumni, for our donors. They provide out the statistical data analysis for planning discussions, which include like regression analysis and perform data mining and integrate modeling and engagement analysis. So a lot of maybe big words, but fun stuff as well that kind of determine for our main stakeholders, which are alumni engagement officers and fundraisers, who should they best target with their message, with their reach, with their approach.
So you're talking about the data that these people are actually using and analyzing and looking at. What kind of data are they actually looking at and using, and how are they using it? What are they doing with it?
It's definitely a mix of things. So because of the nature of the work that we do with the fundraising alumni engagement teams, we're looking at a lot of transactional data. All that gets tied to what we call master data. And that goes back to the individual. So you're an alum, you're a donor, you're a volunteer, you're a supporter, some sort of a friend of the university per se, an event entity or whatnot. So something that provides you with an interaction with the university, as well as organizations that you're part of. Who do you work for? And then we can go bigger into, let's say, big data, which overlaps a little bit with transactional data, because we're looking at what's your click through the emails that you've clicked on. Then we look at external data that provides us with different income levels at the neighborhood level. So based on where you live, we're trying to then approximate what's your income and what's your propensity, what's your capacity for giving and for supporting and for volunteering back to the university.
So could you talk about a challenge that you or your team have had to overcome, and how did you solve it?
There's so many that come to mind, and I think we're facing challenges all the time. A lot of it is really, I might give you a couple of examples, but I think a lot of them are really around the communication aspect and trying to convince people and audiences to embark on a particular solution, which can take a lot of time. So that's why change management practices are always in focus. We don't always follow the best practices, as kind of human nature takes its place instead. But to best create that engagement, we're trying to make sure that we contact the user, so whatever we're going to deliver, as soon as possible, and then have them along the journey every step on the way. But to give you a couple of examples, so something that we've delivered just in the past 6 months that we actually even managed to win an award on was this project that we called key market segmentation. So obviously our alumni are all over the world. And we want to make sure that we identify those key regions where they are located. So then we could formulate different strategies on how to best engage with them depending on the region. What type of events should we create? What type of outreach should we have? Is it worth it to invest resources within a particular region versus another? Because we do have limited resources, as any organization would. So we need to be as efficient as possible. So the main challenge initially was, okay, well, how are we going to define those regions? So think of it as New York. Well, New York can mean different areas. Are you talking about the state? Are you talking about the city? And if so, within the city, is it like the greater New York, or is it just specific parts of New York? Are you going to include Queens or not? So depending on who we would talk to, different definitions came up, and there was a lot of inconsistencies. And because of that, we couldn't compare apples to apples. So that was the first hurdle, to actually put some definitions on some of these main regions that we identified that we have within our database. That probably took quite a few months to decide. So once we found these 21 regions, well, now how do we program it so that we easily find the constituents, the alumni that fit within those regions? And with that, it was a great challenge to undergo, because we also wanted to have it as timely and updated as possible. So we had a mix of software and tools that we used, including the Bing Maps engine, which provided us with the coordinates on said address. And then we used GeoPy and Nominatim, which are kind of these Python libraries. Of course, Python was used as well for some of that automation, PowerShell 2, and SQL Server and Tableau, then to visualize everything and really physically see the regions with the areas on a map, visually striking. And then within the regions, we would actually see the number of constituents and even be able to go at that individual level and see, okay, they live on this corner of the street. Because the fun part then would allow you to see, where would be then a really good event place for us to book that would be most convenient to most individuals within that region. So that was a lot of fun. Took a lot of months. It was a lot of trial and error and research to find the best fit of all these tools working together, and then automating everything so that it's seamless, behind the scenes, effective. And it was such a great project to be able to be part of.
Yeah, that sounds amazing and really, really interesting, and hopefully really, really helpful for those people that are planning the events. That sounds awesome. And not only,
that's definitely one use case and one important one, but not only.
Yeah, definitely. I want to talk a little bit about your career path. So you have a bachelor's in computer science and a master's in business management. So how did you end up working with data? How did you end up in your position?
Great question. So after my computer science degree, I went and used the skills that I've learned, and I became a programmer, a back end, front end, and I learned a lot of things along the way. Worked for a couple of startups and worked on some interesting projects where I was able to wear different hats, because there were usually small teams as part of startups. And I recommend that to anybody if they have the opportunity to go for a startup early in their career or even later. I think it's a great learning opportunity because you get to see different sides that otherwise in a big company have a more scripted job description where you kind of just do the one thing. So because of that, as I was programming, obviously I worked on projects that have to do a lot with databases. So things like e-commerce, for example. And I could see the impact of how that data gets recorded to how that data gets then consumed. And as I was mentioning, I used to wear different hats, and one of the hats was to do the business analysis part of it. And then I kind of stepped into the project management part of it and having more interaction with the business stakeholders, the clients. And as I was having that interaction with the clients and learning more about their requirements and their needs, and then how that needs to be translated into how data gets stored and displayed, used, disseminated, there were a lot of aha moments and a lot of, things that I haven't thought of before. And that kind of made me think a little bit more about data and the importance of data quality and managing that data properly. And I think it's often overlooked, and it's sort of the afterthought for most companies. So yeah, that made me step into data quality. And you can't really do data quality without data governance. And here I am, a lot of years later, just focusing on data governance and how to best manage that data.
So you mentioned your business, the LightsOnData Consulting and Training. You are the founder of this. So could you tell us a little bit about your company and what they do?
Absolutely. So it's trying to put the lights on data by educating people on how to best manage it, how to best disseminating it. And right now, the focus is more on the data management, data governance, but it's set to expand as well. So I do a lot of educational content in form of courses and articles and templates and videos and whatnot. So some are free, some are paid. But from my experience, it's what I didn't have when I started my journey into data management and data governance and BI. So I try to make it as practical as possible. I not only draw from my experience, but those of other data professionals that I've worked with and interacted with, and companies that I worked for or worked with, as I do. And I did some consulting on the side as well. So a lot of experience is really put into it, and making that information as practical as possible and not so much theoretical. So it's something that I'm hoping you're going through a lesson, and then that particular knowledge that you've acquired, you can apply the next day at work. You can use a template that I've provided to kind of get you started and make it easier, and just make it fun and practical.
Yeah, that's exactly what you need in data science. You need to be able to have things that you can put to use right away. So Absolutely. If you're interested in this information, how can you learn more about LightsOnData? Where should people go?
Well, please check out lightsondata.com, as easy as it sounds, or just Google it and check out its YouTube channel, or get in touch with me on LinkedIn, George Firican. There's only 2 of us, and I am the younger one.
And you are also the host of the LightsOnData Show podcast. So can you tell us what your podcast is about, and why should we tune in?
Oh, my pleasure. So each one of the episodes kind of puts the lights on various data topics with really renowned industry experts. So we cover a lot of topics, in a fun and informative interview format. So things on data science and analytics and machine learning, AI, but also data visualization, data storytelling, data strategy, data management, data governance, and really so much more. It kind of really caters to a wider audience. But that's a great thing, that if you're only interested in one piece, you can just follow those topics. But also think that as a data professional, it's really valuable to have at least an awareness of everything that's data related, because it does impact you as a data professional in one way or another. And it's also maybe a little bit different about the podcast that I provide is that it has that audience interaction. So we're filming it live, and it goes on LinkedIn Live, YouTube Live, Twitter Live. And through those channels, if you manage to join in a live episode, then you can have the option to ask a question, provide feedback, put a comment that we often bring back into the show. And then we can address that question, answer a question with that industry expert that we're interviewing.
How much fun. Episode. And when are your episodes live?
Usually every Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern time. But sometimes it can go a little bit off schedule too. We had one earlier this morning, for example.
Excellent. Well, we will put the link to the LightsOnData and the LightsOnData Show podcast in the description of this episode if anybody wants to check it out.
Thank you.
So you are also quite active on LinkedIn, and you've use this to help grow your professional network and your personal brand. So could you maybe give us some tips and tricks on how you've used LinkedIn for this?
Absolutely. You know what? If I can think of one regret that I might have is not getting on LinkedIn earlier. And let me rephrase that, not being active on LinkedIn earlier. I think a lot of professionals have the impression that, you know what, LinkedIn is just for posting your resume. And then when you apply for a job, maybe you can find a job through it that way and just apply it. But it's so much more. It's a platform where you can share experience and learn from one another. And as soon as I found that and started to share my knowledge back and even asking questions, asking for feedback, asking for opinions from others, this brilliant new world really opened up, and it really created a lot of brand awareness for me as an individual, as well as my company. So it was such a win-win situation. I formed a lot of great lasting professional relationships, and a lot of opportunities came out because of it. So I think the lesson there is to start sharing, start asking questions, start engaging on LinkedIn with others. And I feel one of the big roadblock is that if you're a student, if you're just early in your career, you're thinking, well, I have nothing to share. And that's so not true. Even if you start sharing your learning journey, I think that so many people can learn from that along the way too. So it's highly valuable for you to start to be engaged and put content out there that's relevant to others.
And if you're not sure where to start, you can, start following other people and seeing what kinds of things they're posting, such as our guest, George, and we will post a link to his LinkedIn in the description of this episode too.
Thank you.
So many of our listeners are younger. So as somebody in a leadership role who has, mentored many people before, what advice would you have to give someone who's interested in working as a data analyst?
Well, definitely practice, figure out as quickly as you can, what type of, business area are you interested in? Because as a data analyst, I feel the business knowledge is so relevant, and not just the technical knowledge and not just the, statistics, mathematics behind of it, but also how does it apply to a particular business environment? That's something that I often see that's lacking from data analysts, and they know the theory very well, but not necessarily how to apply it for that particular business setting. So I think it's great to try and learn a little about a particular industry, about a particular business, to then see how to best apply those data analytics practices to that specific area. And it really differs from one industry to another, from one company to another. But to hone your skills too, there's so much great content out there that you could take, that it's free. Of course, there's paid resources too, which kind of help you go through a more structured learning process. There's a lot of great networking activities and a lot of great support and communities that you can go into. One that I would recommend and I highly value is called AI and ML by Tom Ives. And he has a great Slack networking group, and they meet every week to basically go through a particular learning piece or just tackle a problem together. And they're such a supportive group that you can just go and be yourself, ask questions. Don't be afraid to learn and make mistakes with them, and they'll help you along the way. And another resource that I recommend is the Dedicated Circle, because very similarly, they are just an amazing community that put a lot of great content. And there's even, job opportunities, co-op opportunities that are sometimes posted. And as I mentioned, a lot of great events and informative sessions that you can learn from.
Excellent. And we can also link those both in the description of the episode also. So before we let you go, is there anything else that you'd like our listeners to know that we didn't get a chance to cover today?
It's something that I've learned from Kate Strachnyi, and that's to just do it, which I know is the Nike motto, but it really holds true, because so far we're afraid of taking that first step. We're afraid of failing, that we don't do anything about it. And we're maybe sometimes over planning, or we're thinking, okay, well, we're not ready yet. We're not good enough for this. So whatever you have in mind, whatever career path you want to embark on, whatever career step you want to take, whatever lesson you want to learn, whatever course you want to go into, and you're, where, should I do it? Should I not? I think, just do it. Listen to your instinct a little bit more, and be a little bit more risk adverse while taking a calculated risk, of course.
Yes, I love it. Just do it.
Just do it.
So George, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for these lovely questions.
It was a pleasure. And to all of our listeners, if you haven't already, check out our previous podcasts. They're available wherever you listen to podcasts. For more information about starting your career as a data scientist, go to dataanalytics.buffalostate.edu, and don't forget to subscribe so that you get a notification each time we release a new episode of Buffalo State Data Talk.